here on the west side of the country. But of course, I'm on the east side of my province, so I can relate to the Easterners as well. And I have colleagues. I spent an hour today with some colleagues from India and Israel and the UK and Australia this morning. So just really enjoying global community. So I'll just, a little bit. It was a great introduction. I won't talk too much about myself. I'd rather just get into getting you some helps and tips and right into our topic. But I volunteer for Compassion Health. I love volunteer work. Member of the BC Conference of Seventh-day Adventists Board of Directors, and I'm also a member of the Health Committee. And we try to organize health events. And I work at the Feeling Good Institute Canada, which is an institute based out of the original is based in the US in Maryland, and it started with just like 5 people who were really excited about David Burns about 15 or 20 years ago, and has since blossomed. And we have a team CBT in the UK and in Australia, and just what it is in a nutshell is it's cognitive behavior therapy is where your thoughts affect your emotions. So if we can change our thoughts, if we can find the truth and we can sift out any errors, then we can reshape our thinking patterns into healthy thinking patterns, which in turn will reshape our emotions. This is a very biblical method. God says, "Come, let us reason together," and He's given us. I've given you, a mind of love and not of fear, and so this is quite a biblical approach. And so CBT has been around since it started around in the 70s by Aaron Beck. David Burns was one of his students and helped him create the distortion list and a few other things. And David has gone on to sell many, many millions of books. He has about 6 or 7 different books. And what David found was CBT alone it was effective, but it was only a little more effective than traditional therapy. And he started doing research, like how could we be more effective? Why do we bring science into psychotherapy? And so T is testing. So it's really important that we understand we can't read minds. I mean, even the best therapists in the world can't know exactly what their client is thinking and feeling in any particular moment, even when they're in a session together. And so T is very important to us, where we write things down and we inquire and we test before and after every session to make sure we understand. And so that was a new piece. And now we're seeing a lot of testing going on. In fact, research shows that therapists who do surveys with their clients to test before and after are 2.5 times more effective, regardless of the modality they use. So that just that piece of having some concrete data to work with makes one a lot more effective. And the E is empathy, because see, in CBT, it's like real cognitive work, right? Let's get to our logic, let's get into our brains. And if we only do that and we don't have the empathy, we don't build the therapeutic bond, whether we're life coaching or whether we're doing therapy, and frankly, if we were doing evangelism or friendship work, if we don't connect before we blast everybody with the truth, it's probably going to hit a wall. And so David noticed empathy was a huge, important part, and empathy rarely cures anything. And there are times where it's helpful, like for grief, for example, there's really nothing we need to fix. Grief is a really normal process we go through in loss. There's no need for a bunch of tools. Empathy can be the only thing we need for grief. And then the A is called agenda setting or assisting resistance. And we're actually going to do some of these. We'll try and do all of them really quickly in our time together. But this is that piece where, we all have a carnal nature, and self likes to stay on the throne and it wants what it wants. And if we don't address that, if we don't address some of the good things that sometimes we see in a negative way, it can derail us. For example, if we don't acknowledge that a donut tastes really good, And that sugar rush does provide a bit of a dopamine hit. If we don't acknowledge these things, it becomes like this hidden thing that kind of derails us as we're trying to change our eating habits and so on. So it's really important for us to address that and bring that all out into the open. I think of it as confession. Um, God is wanting to forgive us and help shape our lives, but if we're not willing to do self-reflection and express that and bring that to awareness, then it makes it more difficult. So it's team, CBT in a nutshell, and we are in unprecedented times. COVID is really pushing us to the limits of our already limited emotional coping skills. And this has been tough for everyone, but it's been especially tough for perfectionists and even more so for women. And there's been a couple studies on this showing women have had an increase in anger and anxiety, quite a bit more so than men. Well, we're not alone, and God is here to walk this journey with us. And want to talk. So I kind of talked a little bit about thoughts and feelings. So, well, why do we feel the way we do? I mean, what happens? Well, the real true answer is we still don't know. It's there's a lot of things we can't test when it comes to human psychology and mind. We know that it's probably a combination of DNA and upbringing, which would be in line with what Scripture says. When we're told, when it says that God will visit the iniquity on the second and third generation, he's not talking about being this mean God who's just going to punish these people for like generations because he's so ticked off. That's not the way God works. But what it is saying is that, when we create these things in our own lives and we make mistakes, certain eating habits, we pass those on genetically. And then also we pass it on in our upbringing and those people around, associations. It might just be upbringing, but it could also be, people we looked up to and steered us either in the right direction or maybe down the wrong path. And so we can be prone to certain self-defeating beliefs. And there's a list of 23 in the book When Panic Attacks. And that's the book I'm pulling a lot of this information from. And I did put that on the slides. And so these self-defeating beliefs, we're going to look at perfectionism today, but there's a few of them. They can drive and make us more prone to certain negative thoughts. Now, ultimately, the good news is, while we can't control our DNA and we can't fix our messed up, screwed up upbringing, and I see her writing, and it's really sad when our parents have not laid the course for us in a gentle and kind and loving manner, and it really does screw us up. And you have every right to be. It wasn't how it was intended. We were intended to have loving, compassionate families. And your anger shows how much you believe in the right way of raising children. So I think that's a really beautiful thing. So this piece about the good news, that's what we want to dive into today, because that's the piece we can change. And there's there is research out there on other things, but I think this will be our topic for today, because I'm trying to really compact a lot of information here. So cognitive behavior therapy, I mentioned this, is based on the idea that that depression and anxiety and anger result from distorted negative thoughts in the here and now. And so what happens is we still have these thoughts going on right now, and that's what's still fueling these feelings. Here's an example of how to really kind of wrap your mind around this. So let's imagine this. I want every one of you to imagine this as much vivid as you can. What if you were unjustly put into a prison, painfully shackled, and forced to sit in the damp earth? How would you feel? And go ahead and put this in the chat. How would you feel if you were unjustly put in prison? You're painfully shackled and forced to sit in this damp, dirty prison. Broken, yeah. How would you be feeling? Go ahead and put it in the chat. Disappointed. Yeah, the unjust system. Angry, yeah. Betrayed, numb, defeated, outraged. Yeah, beautiful. All very, very real, relevant, and healthy emotions. Confused. Oh yeah, like what am I doing here? Um, oh well, someone has already jumped the gun. Yeah. So how do we explain Paul and Silas? Why were they singing? What was going on for them? What was going on for Paul and Silas? So the difference was their thoughts, right? Yeah, their focus, absolutely. So they were still this. The reality didn't change, right? They were still unjustly put into prison, correct? Like they weren't. They hadn't done anything. They focused on. I wonder if this is a witnessing opportunity. I overheard that jailer talking about his family. Let's praise the Lord. It says in everything give thanks. Let's go ahead and sing to God and see if we can witness to this jailer. And so their thoughts were focused on Christ, and that in turn enabled them to get through a very painful situation that was truly unjust. Um, so what is anxiety? Well, anxiety is this was from a um, I think it was from like a dictionary. It says anxiety is a mental health condition that can cause feelings of worry, fear, tension. I would say anxiety is actually an emotion as well. And so for some people, anxiety can cause panic attacks, extreme physical symptoms, palpitations, heart racing, dizziness, tightness in the chest. It can cause all kinds of things. Um, I I should change the slide. I had, like I said, copied it from another book, but I personally don't think it's like a condition. I think it has a lot of benefits. I think it's normal and healthy. I think it's the intensity when it gets so intense or just prolonged, like every day, more and more anxiety, and you can't get out of it. That's when it becomes this maybe condition. But yeah, God gave us the amygdala because He first saw what was happening on this planet with sin, and definitely gave us this as a tool. And we'll see that in more in a minute, but it's very common. 40 million people just in the United States alone. So you're not alone. It affects a lot of people. And this is from Healthline. And this is just sort of repeating what I said before. There's kind of this combination of genetics and environment that kind of makes us predisposed, I'm sorry, to these conditions. So, well, what is perfectionism? Because we're going to talk about both of these things today. So Oxford says it's a refusal to accept any standard short of perfection. And I put our kitty here recently passed away, but he was to me very perfect. He was gentle and with little children. His markings were 100% symmetrical on both sides. And anyway, so I just kind of put him on here. So David describes it as you should always try to be perfect. And whenever you fail or fall short of one of your goals, you beat up on yourself relentlessly, and tell yourself you're just not as good as you should be. These are some of the thoughts that those of us with perfectionism will tell ourselves. And I'm sure there's others, and you can always put them in the chat if one of them, I don't have one here. But I must never fail. Right? I should do better. People won't love me if I'm flawed, if they see my flaws. People won't like me if I show my flaws or be vulnerable. And I shouldn't make mistakes. I expect more from myself than others. This isn't good enough. I'm not good enough. I have very high standards that are often pretty hard to reach. And if things aren't done right, there's no point in doing them at all. That was probably my go-to negative thought. And this can lead to, believe it or not, procrastination. They kind of go hand in hand. I won't talk about that a whole lot, but perfectionism and procrastination really can exacerbate itself. So Well, why is it so hard to change? Well, let me tell you just a little bit about my perfectionism. I won't tell you a whole bunch, but um, perfectionism started really young. You know, probably because my mother was a really real perfectionist, although she was a pretty loving and caring mom. So it wasn't that I had that kind of baggage. It's funny how we put a lot of baggage on ourselves too. Um, but I felt like I could not, like I had to get everything right. Um, and I found myself as doing my mom did some homeschooling for me for a couple of years because I was pretty bullied in school. I didn't really fit in the norm. I was quite a tomboy. And and I begged to be homeschooled. It was just so painful to go to school. And she finally obliged. And I was so excited. Yay, now I can just focus on learning because I love learning. Although I'm ADHD, which also causes problems in school too, but I won't talk about that too much. Um, and I found myself feeling like it was better to get like a beautiful A than to actually learn the material. And so I would cheat. I would go find the answers and just fill them in on the test. Now, it wasn't that I couldn't have gotten that good mark. I mean, once I got to school, I was actually on the honor roll. I've been on the dean's list in college. I could have gotten those marks probably without trying too hard, but I wanted that perfect mark. And in my mind, the perfect mark was 95 to 98. I knew anything more than that was really unrealistic. like like 98 is realistic, but that was my logic at the time. This is how our brains can be so distorted. We really buy in, we really believe them, and we're like, oh no, I'm being reasonable here. And really we're being really critical. And so yeah, it was really hard to change because I really like that feeling that felt good to get that A, even though I didn't earn it. Probably so it makes it pretty hard to change. We get pretty attached to these things that hurt us. And this is where that piece I talked about earlier about the agenda setting, like looking at the resistance, what's going on subconsciously, what's going on behind the scenes for us. So we want to look at some of the benefits of anxiety and what it says about us. And I'm going to give you a chance to throw some stuff in the chat for perfection, but I'll just do anxiety first so you can see what I'm looking for. So what I'm doing here is I'm looking for all the benefits of anxiety and then also what it says about me that's positive and awesome. And so anxiety protects us from harm, right? If we're worried, we think ahead, we plan ahead, we put on the seatbelt, we try to be careful about certain things, wear the mask, right? So anxiety protects us from harm. It shows we care about ourselves and others because we are trying to protect ourselves. We're trying to protect someone else when we worry about someone. It can also help us decide what is dangerous. It's kind of like an alarm system. Well, not kind of, it is an alarm system. The amygdala fires, right? If you're walking down the road and this dog comes running out snarling, woo, like, right, flight, fight, or flee response comes in. And that's a very healthy, important aspect of our genetic makeup that God designed us with. Yeah, it's evidence we love others and so on. It has some benefits and advantages that may not be true, but they feel real. One is called magical thinking, and it's where we feel like we are preventing disaster. Like if I just worry enough, this won't happen, right? If I just, oh yeah, and it's really common. And we're being honest. We're being honest. Like things can happen. This is reality. We're living in a perilous time, or maybe we live in a perilous location. Maybe it's not safe to go out at night. And out my door, we went for a walk here, took my dog out, and it didn't go more than, I think it was a couple hundred yards from my yard, and great big bear scat in the road. So it's like, yeah, I didn't see the bear, but and it doesn't cause me anxiety anymore. But yeah, I should be aware and cautious, looking around and making sure I'm not scaring any mamas with their babies, because that could be a dangerous situation. And anxiety could help keep our curiosity into check. And I won't go into this, but I could sit here and make you pages of benefits of anxiety, and also what it shows about us that's positive and awesome when we have anxiety. Well, so now let's try perfectionism, and I want to hear your ideas. What do you think are some benefits of perfectionism, and what does it reveal about you that's positive and awesome? What are some possible benefits of perfectionism? Oh yeah, achieving excellence, doing something you're proud of. Absolutely. Shows you don't settle for less. Oh, I love that. Yeah. Order and system. I want the best for me and for others. Accuracy, working hard. I love these. Oh, keep them coming. That's great. Um, Contributions are usually needed. Yeah, we're we're definitely in a time where people are demanding of us, right? Could minimize your loss of income, safety. Yeah, gives you a sense of control. These are great. Yeah, there's so many great benefits. I just wrote a few here ahead of time, and you've written so many more great ones. And so that's wonderful. But yeah, it can make us work harder, right? It kind of gives us that work ethic, and it shows how much you care about the work you're doing, because you want that excellence. It's not just like, okay, let's get it done, but it's like, oh, like let's get it done to the best of our ability. Whatsoever thy hand findeth to do it with all thy might, right? Um, and then when I do something great, it's really perfect, I feel terrific. And I won't settle for less. Someone wrote that already, and shows high standards, and other people will admire me because I'm hardworking and conscientious, right? So lots of benefits. So, I mean, if there's all these benefits to perfectionism, why am I even talking about this? Why are we here? Like, sounds like it's working for us, right? Sounds like we should just all keep going on with our perfectionism. You can put in the chat what you think might be the answer. Why would we want to? Sounds like it's working. Should we just crippling? That's a fairly strong word. Yeah. The disappointment, right? When things don't turn out. On on cycles of unhappy behaviors and habits. Oh, totally. Because we try and we fail, and then we try and mitigate that with some other thing that might not be healthy, whether that's eating or some other thing. Overwhelming to keep up to. Yeah, that's how you never can achieve it, right? Who is perfect? It's not achievable. Yeah. So great job, guys. Yeah. So I just, like I said, I wrote a few things out ahead of time here. But my perfectionism may create a lot. Not may, it does cause a lot of stress and worry. Because when I fail and make mistakes, I feel terrible. And it can prevent creativity and taking healthy risks because I'm afraid of failing. It's hard to learn from criticism because I feel this was really true for me, really true for me. It's hard to learn from criticism because I feel threatened and defensive. Because of course you're attacking my entire being, because perfection is who I am, right? I've labeled myself this identity, and you're attacking my identity when you try to give me advice or teach me a new way of doing something. Lose sight of the bigger picture, focusing too much on the details, and I, number 7 again is another strong one for me. Not getting along well with others, because I remember as a child, I was an only child. I would take toys out of my friend's hands, say, "You're doing it wrong. It's got to be done this way." There's the box, and you need to fit into the box, which is not. I had really generous friends. I don't know if I would have got along with me too well as a kid. And then procrastination is another big one. Feeling like a failure. I see some other ones. Not mindful. Tensions are increased. Absolutely. So one of the important things when we're trying to get to work, okay, so now we know all that. Well, how do we deal with it? How do we change this in our brain. And so we have found through research that being really specific is really important. Picking a moment in time when this is affecting me is critical, because depression, anxiety likes to live in the general and the abstract and the nebulous. And when we can get really specific, we can really dive into what's going on for us. And so it's kind of this who, what, when, where. So we want to pick a really specific moment in time. Who was I with? When was this happening? Where was I? And when was it? DML stands for Daily Mood Log, or DMJ, Daily Mood Journal. And it's something that David uses. And I'll show you a sample here. But this is in the book When Panic Attacks. And you can get it free on his website as well. So I'll put more information at the end. But it's where we can kind of pick our emotions and write in some negative thoughts. So this one, if I zoom in, let me see here. I grabbed the wrong slides because I had one where I had this already fixed. But let me see here if I can just, I'll just zoom in here. But anyway, so I'm going to pick this moment in time. How much time do I have? Let me try and go quickly here. So this would be like where this was when I was taking my diploma training for applied psychology and counseling. I got a B on an assignment. And this was the time when I had already crushed quite a few of my self-defeating beliefs. And perfection was definitely on the swing out. I was learning what it meant to really surrender and give myself to God and die to self. Because when we die to self, often these kind of self-defeating beliefs either become very apparent and we have to deal with them, or they just get dissolved. So it can go both ways. And so I found that a lot of my self-defeating beliefs did dissolve as I had that conversion experience, but not all of them. Some of them needed some very specific work. And this was one of them. So I got a B on a previous assignment, and I had decided that Bs were okay by this point. Now I had gone through college enough in high school, and I had given up this idea that I had to have 95% to 98. That was my little window. And so, yeah, this particular sample mood log event was in the handouts, and I did give those to Amara, and so she can give these delays. I might even be able to, let me see if in the chat, if file sharing is enabled. Maybe in a minute, because it doesn't just go to my computer. I'd have to take it off Dropbox, and that would take me a minute. I don't want to do multitasking. So yeah, and then there's a blank free one. Like I said, I can give you David's website. It's all his stuff. So I had to submit another one, and I could feel some anxiety coming up, like, I'm okay with the B, but what if I get less? And I really wish I was getting an A, and some of these negative thoughts I'm feeling for coming back up. So I just record my emotions. So this is how the daily mood log works. We want to record everything going on for us. So the very top is the facts, right? This is the situation. This is the facts of what's going on. I did get a B on the previous assignment. That's a fact. I have to submit another one. That's a fact, right? And then I'm going to put in all the emotions. And what I'm doing here is I'm actually rating how I'm feeling in that moment. And we're not going to be able to get to all these columns today. I just don't have time. But and then I start writing down my negative thoughts. Right? I shouldn't have made so many mistakes last time. I should be able to get better marks. I should try harder, and so on and so forth. No one will hire me if I don't get good grades. Who wants a therapist that only gets 80%? I mean, really, like, I'm never going to find any clients. It's not good enough, and no point in continuing if I don't get good grades. And this had tripped me up. When I first started college, I wanted to do early childhood education, and I got a B in history, and so I dropped it like a rock. So I'm like, oh, if I can't get an A, then I'm too stupid to do this. And I just dropped the whole class, and I switched my major, and from there I went into business. And I did well because it was quite logical and a lot of common sense and very intuitive, and accounting and law and marketing and that was great. I could do that without even putting much effort out. And so I was like, yeah, I procrastinated on anything that required effort because I didn't want to feel so disappointed in myself if I failed. It really held me back in some ways. So, but God works with us. And again, I'm not going to have time to go over this, but this is like the checklist of distortions, which I would go through with these negative thoughts and so on. But let me go back to the regular size here. Okay. So we only have a few more minutes. We'll probably not get through all these methods, but let's just tackle a couple methods. And one thing I want to say before jumping into this is there's like over 100 methods. And so the reason for that is we are different. We are unique. We think differently. We have different experiences. And so what works for one person may not work for someone else. So, if you listen to me describe some of these and it's like, well, it's not seeming to help anyway, I will crush my negative thoughts. Don't be alarmed. There's lots of other tools and techniques out there. These are just a few that can be helpful. So the first one is called the double standard. And imagine, if you will, with me, you have another dear sister and she's like identical to you. She's single, she's going everything you're going through. She's feeling and thinking everything you're thinking. Now imagine speaking to her like you talk to yourself in that critical voice. Imagine your critical voice. Now imagine you verbalizing that toward her. Would you do that? Would you talk to another woman the way you talk to yourself when you're doing self-criticism? Maybe some are really bold and would, but I would imagine that many of you are compassionate, caring Christians, and you'd find a hard time saying nasty things to other ladies. Can you imagine saying, listen, if you make mistakes, you're just less worthwhile? Or you should never make any mistakes. Or you're not lovable if you're flawed. Then, you should do better. You're just not doing good enough. There's just no point to doing any of this because you can't seem to get it right. What would that be like? How many of you can put in the chat, how many of you would be willing to say this to another woman that you really cared about? Now remember, this other woman is a perfectionist too. She's got high standards just like you. You can put in the chat. Would you be willing to speak to another person the way these kind of thoughts come to you? Yeah. Yet we do this to ourselves all the time, don't we? We seem to have this double standard where we kind of put ourselves, and shamefully, I have to say for myself, it's because pride. I kind of had my own standard for myself, right? I'm like, well, other people maybe or can't quite get an A, but I'm smart enough to get an A. And that's really hard to admit. And I'm almost tearing up as I'm saying it, because it's totally the opposite of what Christ wants for us. And these standards of being so cruel to ourselves, first of all, it says, to love others as we love ourselves. How much love can we give someone else if we're just being cruel to ourselves? It doesn't work very well. And we try, but it's coming from a place of, well, I hope this is right, because we haven't experienced it ourselves yet. Verbal attack, isn't it? So that's one technique. And sometimes well, most of the time I'll do this in a role play where I will actually set this is called a paradoxical double standard. And the role play, I would say, well, now I want you to talk to me how you would talk to someone else. What would you say? Because that's now going to record the positive thoughts, right? That's going to record the affirmations. And so you say, well, how would I talk to them? Well, I might say something like, it is really frustrating when we make mistakes. I can feel you. I don't like making mistakes either. And I think pursuit of excellence is really important. And I can see that matters a lot to you. That might be one way of saying it, right? So I'm not going to minimize the fact this person has high standards, or myself, but kind of an acceptance of it. Right? There's many more ways we could reword that too. I just discovered recently I am human, and I do make flaws. And that's okay, because it says that God's glory is made manifest in my weakness. So I'm okay with my flaws now. In fact, I'm really glad I have flaws, because that really points me to Christ, and then I feel really connected with him. And so, man, every time I have a flaw, I'm just so grateful. I'm excited now. We have a saying when we work together in team community, team therapists, we want to fail as fast as we can. We want to fail joyously, because the only way to improve is to fail. If we've never done it before, we're not going to come out the first time smooth sailing, like, oh yeah, I just delivered the best presentation in the world the very first time I ever present, right? We do need to fail fast, learn quick. I like that, Claudia. Absolutely. And the right delivery makes a world of difference. I love that. And that's actually, we call that the semantic technique, and it's one of the techniques here. The next one, actually, and then we'll maybe do some small group work here. So semantic technique is where we use words that are less colorful and emotionally loaded. So we're using softer, kinder, more realistic language, actually, because quite often the critical language is actually pretty distorted. We're magnifying all our flaws and our sins and our guilt and whatever's going on for us. We're magnifying that. And so what we want to do is the truth will set us free. Right? Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. Truth is very important. And so if we can make more realistic language, more truthful, balanced language, that can be a really important thing. And so instead of, I shouldn't have made that mistake, we tell ourselves, it would be preferable. I wish, for me, the language would be, I wish I hadn't made that mistake. Yeah, just as opposed to should. Should is this rule that we put upon ourselves. And there's actually a couple very valid shoulds. There's the law of the universe shoulds, the law of love, the gravity, if I drop a pencil, it should fall to the floor, right? Like that's, it's a law. If the 10 commandments, these are shoulds, these are musts, these are oughts that are very important. So these moral shoulds and these law of the universe shoulds. But all other shoulds that we tend to give ourselves are rules that we create. And the danger in that is when we start creating our own rules, it can be very difficult for anyone else to affirm those, right? Because we're in control now. It's like, this is my rule for me, and I create this little wall of bubble that becomes impermeable. And the truth is, I make mistakes. And so I make mistakes in creating those rules too. And so a multitude of counselors of safety. I love that you guys are having these groups and getting to know each other and sharing and reflecting with each other, because isolating to oneself, while seems great for a really confident narcissist, can lead us down a pretty dangerous path. So let me see here. I want to go through the rest of these maybe really quickly. I'm looking at the time. So process versus outcomes, where we kind of evaluate performance, both on the outcome, like getting the B or C+, and then what it took to get there. So when I got that B, it was material I had never done before. I have a cognitive dysfunction. I had a brain trauma when I was a teen, and I struggle with anything where I have to memorize. Hence, I'm using my PowerPoint to do this with you guys. And so, I was, and then I'm using very subjective material, which is not my forte. I'm a left brain, accounting, computer programming, like numbers. I love numbers. I love it when I can do, multiple choice, true or false, right or wrong, black or white. And here I'm doing material that's psychology, that's really subjective. And I was, the assignment that I got the B on was kind of, you'd be given this little vignette and you have to decide what disorder they might have from like this little vignette. Well, I mean, when we actually do diagnosing, it takes 2 to 3 hours. So, how was I to get a perfect grade on a paragraph? But I didn't know that. And so that was, Afterwards, I knew it, and then I could go, well, wait a minute. I think a B was pretty good considering, my particular skill level and the material. And that really did help me quite a bit. So that's one of the tools that helped me. And so this one, there's other questions you could ask yourself, but one is, would it be possible to base my performance on both my efforts and the outcome, right? Instead of just on the results. This one's a little bit longer. I'm gonna look at my time. I think we might skip let's define terms. And be specific. This is where you stick with reality and avoid judgments about the reality. So in my situation, it's okay, well, I need to improve my diagnostic skills. Okay, how can I do that, right? I get specific about one of my mistakes or flaws, however you want to word that. And then I can turn that into a goal. I could form a goal around this. This is what I'd like to do. This is what I'd like to work toward, as opposed to beating myself up about it, which wouldn't actually improve anything other than making me feel pretty miserable and probably even more anxious and on a test and do even more poorly. And so instead of thinking of myself as defective and worthless, instead I'm going to focus on, okay, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? And how can I improve in my weaker areas? And so we'll focus on the real problems and resist making these vague generalizations about worth. And perfectionism often likes to just you're not worthy, you're not good enough, right? That's a value